Welcome back, one and all, to the official PodStance PunkStance Podcast. This is once again me talking at the beginning. You will be happy to know that it's not just me talking for this. I actually got a guest in this time. Only took me to my third episode, but we got there in the end. But this time I've got in my brother, who came down from London. He has always wanted to be onto a podcast, one of mine. I think I beat him to the punch. He's starting his own one, which you'll hear about at the end. But he popped down. Obviously, I'm got to see my family at some point, but he'd never actually been to my flat where I'm living now, so he thought he'd come down for a visit and get a podcast into it anyway. So it's been a really, really interesting chat, actually. He went into details of an album that I wasn't expecting him to, which obviously you'll hear about in due course, but obviously my brother and I, we've shared a lot of interests in our music. We've grown up together and sort of grown up with the same music from what our parents inspired with us, and just general things that we've listened to at the same time. He's the one that really got me into a lot of the music that I listen to now. So I was quite taken aback with the album that he chose, just because it wasn't one that I knew nearly as much about as I thought I would. So it's a really interesting chat that we had. It goes into some really interesting topics about his personal life, some things that I didn't know about, some things that I did. And just it's a much more personal take than I was expecting. So you can tell I'm surprised because I keep going, I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting any of this. So yeah, it's a really, really good one, this. I'm really happy with how it's come out. So hopefully you guys will enjoy it too. Just the fact that I've got a guest on is really exciting. There's a few more that I've got planned for at the moment. Obviously, I don't want them to all be my family, but I think this one was a really good starting point because my brother and I share a lot of our interests in music. He used to want to do music journalism and all that stuff like I'm doing now. Well, I guess journalism's doing a lot of heavy lifting in that, but, ho-hum, what else would you call it? And he used to sort of show me most of the albums that he was buying, most of the music he was listening to, and that's kind of where that's how we got here, really. So it was really nice to have him over. Really nice to chat about this album in particular, one that I haven't heard a lot about. And I was pleasantly surprised by how in-depth he went when talking about all these tracks and the kind of stories and anecdotes that come from it. So I'm sure you'll find just as much solace and engagement in it as I did, because I know him better than most people, and I was still taken aback. So you never really know. You're always learning stuff about even your closest relations, aren't you? So yeah, sit back, relax, enjoy it. We'll have some more stuff on the way, but I'll get right straight into it with this episode with my older brother talking about the album that saved his life, quote unquote. So yeah, hope you enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side. It's quite weird that you're actually in my house though now. I've lived here for 6 months, and you're in my room.
Well, it's very, very clearly your room.
What do you mean by that?
It's ideal male living space. No bed frame. More space dedicated to the TV than.
Well, it's on my chest of drawers, so for those you can't see it, no one can see this. That's the unfortunate detriment of doing it as a podcast.
But great content from audio medium.
Well, for those who are listening, there was an intro, but I haven't recorded it yet, so I'm trying a new thing out. But this is Mr. James. Do you mind having your surname involved?
Even
though we're related. This is James Sternham. He is from Clapham, but originally from Kent. I have known you for my entire life.
It's got to be about that now, I reckon.
Give or take. 23 years, 6 months and 2 days, if I'm correct in that.
Oh, that is horrendous.
And you've known yourself for 26 years and 2 months and 10 days.
Physically, yes. I feel like spiritually I'm always meeting myself for the first time every day.
Continuously meeting yourself.
It's a horrible, horrible experience.
I didn't expect you to be so philosophical in that regard. Normally you're just like,
you need to look up some new philosophy if that's what you consider philosophical.
I'm existing, I'm here. Oh, this bodes well for the music chat, because this has already gone completely haywire.
Oh, I don't really believe in music.
I invited you here to talk about music, and you don't believe. You believe in your own spirituality, but not the concept of music itself.
Yeah, it's just, it's just like noise, isn't it? It's not real.
This is going to go great. So obviously, for those who do or don't know, this is my older brother. We've known each other a while, and I believe the album in question that you were going to talk about today wasn't the initial one you were going to go for. You've been rounding out a few ideas.
Yes, so I did have a few. I chose this one, which I won't name yet for dramatic reasons, because I felt I had the most to say about it in relation to the extraneous parts of this podcast. I considered doing a couple of neck deep albums, but I feel like being the first guest on a pop punk podcast and doing a neck deep album is a little bit shake weighty, a little bit feeding the geese.
On the nose.
A little bit on the nose would be a better way of putting that.
In fairness, though, I mean, I want to go in... I think I mentioned in either one of the two podcasts, I can't remember. I think in both podcasts I've mentioned Neck Deep, because the first one I was talking about poorly is the sort of song about my mum, or our mum, should I say. And I referenced 1970-something. That's sort of...
a song famously about dads.
The dad equivalent. And then in the one about bearings, I'm spoiling all these as if people have listened to them, but I don't know why someone would go for a third episode of a podcast outside of that.
Maybe they suspect it follows the pattern of the Harry Potter movies, where the third one is the best.
The best. But then I also mentioned their recent song, It Won't Be Like This Forever, which came out sort of around the same time as when Bearings did theirs.
Good track. A good track.
It's a good song. It's got
bodes well for the album coming up because it's potentially the weakest of their new songs, and it's still pretty good.
It's pretty good. So, I'm very hyped. But that one's got a lot of personal resonance to me, as I will probably discuss. But the point is that I have mentioned them twice already.
Yes.
So they're getting enough coverage.
And so I felt it inopportune and a bit presumptuous of me to pick one of the most successful pop punk bands of the current time.
Was it going to be Life's Not Out to Get You by any chance?
It was either going to be Life's Not Out to Get You or Wishful Thinking.
I see.
Or their first EP.
So
I could have extended that bit
first section
and
of their discography.
named all of their albums, but no, I was dancing between those. And then I did have an initial hankering for Motion City Soundtrack's second album, Commit This to Memory.
I haven't listened to that one in years.
Well, this was my issue. I really like that album, but I've not listened to it in a long time because I'm an adult. So
It's not 2006 anymore.
It's not 2006 anymore. A year I'm pretty sure this album didn't even exist yet.
Oh no, what was... That's true, actually. I can't remember the exact release dates for them.
For the context of the bit, let's say it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I didn't have as much to say about that. Okay. And also I sort of feel like I've outgrown it a little bit. And I also felt it was about as deep as a puddle in terms of substance at some parts. They're one of those bands where they've got some absolute banger tracks, but their albums overall felt a little bit undeveloped to me personally.
That's fair enough. I mean, it's that'll be one to revisit though.
Oh yeah, for me. If you end up bringing me back on, I'll bring that one up at some point.
Well, with my plethora of guests,
your extensive guest list. If I can get on in the next 3 or 4 months,
of the last two, it's being myself and End of List.
It's truly the Soho House of podcasts. But no, so my chosen album is drum roll, please.
I was just going to say
don't add it in. It's funny if you don't add it in. No, my chosen album is World Record, the second album by Lower Than Atlantis.
Now I was surprised by this because I remember us bonding over the release of Lower Than Atlantis' fourth album and self-titled album in 2014, which is still my favourite of theirs.
So this was also my first Lower Than Atlantis album, the self-titled one. I was aware of them before that. Obviously, they'd had some big singles, the biggest of which is off this album, World Record. But I didn't really get into them until they got that Radio 1 notoriety.
Was that with Here We Go?
It was Here We Go.
I thought so.
It was 2014. I was, whatever age I was then, like 40 or something. And I was listening to Radio 1 because I wanted to impress my peers by knowing a lot about popular music. And yeah, so I heard Here We Go. I went, yo, this track, it slaps.
It be bopping.
As the common 40-year-old vernacular. And I got really into them based on that album. It was the first album, and I believe only album of theirs that I actually own on CD. And I thought that album was great. It took me a couple years to get into their back catalogue, by which point I'm pretty sure they'd actually broken up. That's a lie. It was about a few months before they broke up. To realise that their fourth album is both their fourth chronologically and fourth quality-wise.
Really?
Their first 3 albums are nothing short of spectacular.
Really?
They're all unique in their own ways. And I feel like the middle album of those three. This one is a very good blend of what they became, this sort of very popular, very polished British rock band, and where they started on their first album, which was incredibly rough, where they sing songs about the recession and playing with their willies and video games. And this is that nice little bit in the middle where there's songs that you could definitely hear on the radio that could fill stadiums, but they've also got silly songs about kicking their mates out of tree houses and laughing at their broken bodies.
Yeah.
So
the usual modern rock
scene of, I believe, 2011.
It's interesting you mentioned that, though, because when I was researching this about 35 minutes ago, I noticed something while I was reading through that apparently Mike Deuce,
the inventor of the tennis match point.
Yes, and the that was not what I thought you were going to say, but fair enough. I believe he's now under the name Headache.
Formerly, I believe he's gone back to Mike Deuce, a much more sensible name. No, he's got some demos out on SoundCloud. He's building a studio. He's hoping to produce some new tracks. Yeah. But yeah, continue. He
said, when I was going through, he claimed, and I quote, well, in the alt rock scene, and I quote, no one else in the current music scene was doing alternative rock. So in the sort of modern sense that you were talking about, he basically said that this isn't something, especially with World Record and Far Q as well, which we'll get to.
We will get to.
He was basically insinuating that Lower Than Atlantis were being this unique, idiosyncratic presence within the modern rock scene. And do you believe that that's the case?
I think there's definitely some weight to what he says there. This album preceded Don Broco getting huge. I'd now argue they are the trailblazers for that breed of rock. Bring Me the Horizon, I'd argue, are still the biggest current English rock band, but I think Broco have that niche much more covered. They preceded the bigger success of bands like Mallory Knox.
Who's a favourite in our household?
Death Havana, yes, Mallory Knox were... God, they were good back in their day.
Prior to 2019.
I feel like, obviously, you've got bands like Neck Deep, for example, who are much more prevalent in pop punk and other subgenres. But when it comes to just straight alternative rock, I believe Lower Atlantis may not have been the actual trailblazers, but they're the ones that made it popular enough to get big slots on Radio 1.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, I just thought it was interesting because when you were talking about the albums in chronological order as well, I have got the list up here, so I don't have to remember. But Far Q started in 2010.
Yes.
Followed by World Record only a year later. They recorded it in October and came out, I think, around this time last year, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, no, it was April of 2011, never mind. It was recorded around the same time. Changing Tune followed that another year later. So in the space of 3 years, or 2 years even, they had what you're arguing is
an extremely strong run.
Yeah, and that's
truly the Star Wars trilogy of albums.
Of modern rock albums.
Of all albums.
Wow, oh, there you go.
Who even are the Beatles? It was 3 very good albums in a row.
And then you had 2 years later, you had the aforementioned self-titled Lower Than Atlantis, then the black edition of that a year later with a few extra singles. And then the final Safe in Sound, which... Are you claiming that to be the worst of the albums?
I mean, I feel like it's a very apt title. It's very safe
in its sound.
No, it's an album that feels written for the radio.
Yeah.
There are some banger tracks on that album. 2 or 3 in particular are like some of their best tracks they've ever done. But it's a step away from the grit and the grunge that made them so good back in the day, and also why I'm talking about one of their early albums in the first place. You can release good music, but if it's not got anything behind it, there's no grit, no sleaze, no substance, then what's the point?
And I think going back to what you were saying, it's interesting that you've come to an album that I personally didn't even know about in terms... Well, you've talked about Lower Than Atlantis before. We've liked them for a while, but I had not looked into their back catalogue at all until you mentioned it. So what was it that sort of brought you to the back catalogue after listening to the original self-titled?
The boring line is I was running out of things to listen to, and I thought, hey, this album's alright, let's see what their other stuff is like. But no, I think you need to set the scene for around sort of 2013, 2014. I am... 15, 16?
I thought you said you were 40.
Yeah, I know, but we're past that now. I was about 15, 16.
Benjamin Button over here.
We were out in the fields of Kentish Town, not Kentish Town in London, as in a town that is in Kent. In the backfields, me and the boys drinking beer for the first time.
At the ripe old age of 40.
At the ripe old age of 40. We'd be sat there. One of my mates would hand me some Coke. He'd say, "Go on, try it." And I'd say, "No, I can't." Because, of course, I had braces at the time and I wasn't allowed to drink fizzy drinks. But this is the setting, you know. We're a bunch of teenagers. We're just hanging out. We're out later than we should be. And this album is the soundtrack for that time in my life. It's probably the one I played on loop the most. I've got very distinct memories of walking down pavements near where I used to live.
The non-denominational pavements.
Non-denominational pavements. What sort of denominational pavements are you interacting with?
I don't know, just familiar ones, pavements that I'm well aware of.
Well, I'm familiar with most pavements. There's not a lot of variation. But no, just walking down roads, it's, 1 o'clock in the morning, the street lights have turned off. I'm shitting bricks because some bush has rustled behind me, and I'm pretty sure it's a man with a knife and not a fox.
It was Kent after all.
It was Kent after all. Truly one of the most dangerous parts of Britain. They call it the Garden of England.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, that old chestnut.
But yeah, and this is there's a lot of songs on this album that relate to that sort of that mid to late teen ennui, that feeling of not knowing where you're meant to be in life, not sure what you're meant to be doing. Something that I don't experience in life at all anymore. I know exactly what I'm meant to be doing, and I have no qualms with anything.
So would you say it was like a nice amalgamation of like apprehension and nostalgia at the same time?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's an album that I definitely continue to listen to that gained additional meaning in my early 20s when I was at university.
And quote-unquote grew up.
And, well, let's not go that far. But no, there's a lot of
songs... The quotation
songs...
marks were very important in that sentence.
But yeah, there's a lot of songs on here that deal with that in your 20s as well. I believe the band were sort of 20 to 22 in age when they wrote this one. So a lot of that gained new meaning for me when I was listening to it again as a student.
I think the vast majority of their albums... I know definitely that the titular one had 12 tracks, but having gone through, I noticed that this one also had the initial 12 tracks when it came out, but had 3 extras that came out just as, I think it was a US release.
It would have been an additional.
Yeah. But in terms of the songs, you had the main singles, which was Motor Way of Life, or Motor in parentheses, Beach Like a Tree, and Deadliest Catch. And I know you've mentioned Deadliest Catch a number of times for the wordplay that they use in that.
The true showstopper of the whole album,
would you say that that's your favourite song? Or if you have a favourite song, which one is it? And why is it that one that's resonated with
Deadliest Catch is my favourite song by the artist, full stop. Not for any emotionally resonant meaning, although there is some, but more because I find it extremely impressive that you can write an incredibly catchy rock song that never falters, in which every single line is a pun about sailing. Like I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's a genuinely fantastic song that's about like, it's sad because girls don't like me, or whatever people were singing about back then. But it's more than that. It's a song built out of puns. Something I know that you certainly appreciate.
Oh, I'm a huge fan. I always have been. It's funny though, because while I was looking at this, Deadliest Catch is, as you say, about a general relationship theme or girl not liking boy. But Mike just actually said himself, and I quote, it is about a girl, I won't bore you with gory details. So there's a lot of self-referential humour to this whole track anyway, even outside of the lyrics itself.
I've actually met Mike Deuce. He's a very nice guy. Back when I was taking the first steps towards my lifelong dream of being a music journalist.
You're sat with me now,
and here I am being interviewed myself. Boy, how the turntables! But no, I used to write for the culture section of my university paper. He came to play one of their last ever shows when I was at university in second year, I think. Had a nice sit down and a chat with him. Very nice guy. And yeah, he seemed very sort of grounded about it. He is literally just some guy. He's got no airs of being some kind of rock star. He just wanted to go out. He wanted to say what he had to say. He wanted to have some fun. That the gig afterwards was one of my favourite gigs I've ever been to. In fact, something that will come up later on when we get into the song list.
So you have Deadliest Catch as the top. I mentioned the other singles, but the tracks include, I think it's High at 5, Uni 9mm. I don't know if that's a reference to a gun.
It's another pun on the Uzi 9mm.
I did think this.
But it's in fact a song about how sad he is that all his friends went off to uni and left him behind. Yeah. Something I cannot relate to, because I did in fact go to university and leave some friends and go to university behind.
And then, if that's the sad one, then the following track, Another Sad Song, seems a bit to the point.
Well, this is, so Another Sad Song, named not because it is just another sad song, it's actually a lyric in the song. Although I guess that lyric is in reference to the fact that it is just another sad song. But no, it's a really, really fantastic track. Really highlights his lyrical capabilities. It's very personal. It feels like the kind of song you couldn't really cover because it's very clearly by Mike Deuce, the creator of the tennis match point. And, there's so many references to his own life, his own struggles. But the way it's framed and the way it's crafted mean that, you're always going to find some of yourself in that album. Singing about, he's so ancient and old and he's lost all his opportunity and nothing's ever going to be the same. And then sings about how he's only 21. On one hand, it's deeply insulting as someone that is no longer 21, has been 21 and probably felt the same at 21. Now looking back, going, "Oh, you stupid idiot! You're fine. No, shut up. Get up. You're gonna be fine. Okay.
There's no way to speak to your host.
You are 21 years old. You're not even 21. You're an ancient crone as well.
Yeah.
You're what? 23.
6 months and 2 days.
Yeah, you still got songs written about you. No one writes about being 26 apart from that one guy. But
nobody likes you when you're 23. As they say famously.
Well, you brought that on yourself by starting a podcast. But it's a great song, and I believe it is still on a playlist that I crack out every now and again called Home County Sad Boy Tunes. Songs.
Link that in the.
You can put it in the show notes if you want.
Is it a public playlist?
I don't know. I will make it public for the benefit of the listeners of this podcast. Go check out Home County Sad Boy Tunes. Songs that I added whilst walking home from the pub at like 18 or 19 across misty fields going, boy, I sure wish I felt things about stuff, and picking songs that I was pretty sure were sad or had made me like get misty-eyed whilst drunk and going, that's one for the playlist. just absolutely gamifying all the emotions in my life.
Wow. It seems to, when having used the word nostalgia, it does seem you keep coming back to that same thought of Through the Misty Fields, or just generally being that walk back, as it were.
I think this album is very much the lens, that the rose tinted lens through which we view that time in our life. It's an album that evokes very strong images of me being like 17, 18. Deadliest Catch, despite being ostensibly about nothing except how much he wants to make jokes about sailing, does in fact remind me of when I used to go sailing a lot. And like all the experiences that came with that. I hated sailing.
Beautifully ironic.
I've missed it every day of my life, but I know for a fact if I ever got back in a sailing boat, I would hate every second, just wish to be back on shore. But because I have not been sailing in what I'm pretty sure is close to 8 or 9 years now, all I think is, God, I love sailing. And I love it because every time I listen to Deadliest Catch on this album, I go, this reminds me of sailing. I like this song.
Wow.
I guess that means I like sailing then. And then I try and look up holidays in the south of France that I can afford, where I will go and be miserable the whole time on a sailing boat.
Where are you heading to? Normandy?
Normandy is not in the south of France.
No, I know, but you said France, and I just you can't afford a holiday.
I said France, and your first thought was Normandy.
Well, that's what you can afford, surely.
I can afford more than you think.
Well, that's a personal anecdote if I've ever heard one in relation to the songs. But the next one I need you explaining as well, because I've read it up. And Marilyn's Mansion.
An absolute banger of a track. Yet again, another pun title.
Is this the one that refers to the tree houses? Because I believe a description of the song has something to do with like he used to make dens in a forest and he would feel safe and comfortable in these places.
Yeah, that's a really boring way of putting it, but yeah. So the song is not even 2 minutes long, but it's bangers all the way through. Verse is very strong, leading into an also good chorus, but the verse is where the magic happens. Yeah, very much about, wasn't it cool when we were like 10 and we could go and hang out in our cool kids treehouse, and I could play king and you could play guy that the king kicks out the treehouse. We could just snaffle sweets all day. Oh, it was great stuff. It's distilling that nostalgia that you were talking about very, very clearly. It's just, boy, wasn't it cool when we were young and didn't have any responsibilities. And the only thing I had to worry about was whether the kid I kicked out of my treehouse was going to die or not. This is an actual thing that comes up in the song, but it is fantastic.
It is surprising how a lot of the tracks do have a very personal attachment to Mike Deuce and the band themselves. I know a lot of albums have these personal stories and come in, but it seems from what you're saying, pretty much most, if not all, of these songs have some relation to their past and like very just small parts of their lives that don't seem very important until you look back. And
I think a lot of that comes from the fact that this was not an album made with commercial success as intent. Obviously, every artist makes things so that people listen to it, but their first album, Far Q, was it was very successful within the scene. It leans a bit closer towards hardcore rock. Very successful within the scene. Really made a name for themselves, got them the success they needed to go on and make this sophomore album. But at the same time, it didn't grant them any commercial success. This wasn't playing on radio stations beyond the odd specialist track. And yeah, it wasn't until when they were making this album, which happened to have some huge radio hits. Beach Like the Tree, the second track on the album, was absolutely dominant in the rock charts, I believe. Or at least not in the charts, it was on the radio all the time. It's the song that introduced me to the band, in fact. But yeah, so this album wasn't made with any intention of making something radio friendly. They were like, hey, we are 20 to 22, truly the worst age to be. How are we going to get through this? What are we going to put down on paper to get over having men's mental health? And the answer was, let's write a bunch of songs about times we were happy, times we thought we were happy but were sad, times we were sad but thought we were happy, and finally the fourth quadrant, times we were sad. And I feel like just focusing on those personal emotions, putting themselves into the album and not having to worry about any external like marketing boons is what made it such a strong album for the first 2/3.
Yeah, and the one that we're going to talk about after, which was Bug, if I'm not mistaken. This one was quite interesting for me purely because, well, I mean, you mentioned it in Deadliest Catch as well, but Bug was purely about a girl, which is obviously the most common trope you can find in pop punk rock. A lot of that kind of theme comes through quite a lot. Very common trope, but it was still in relation to a personal connection he had with someone. It was a female bassist in another band that was sort of messing Mike about, and he wrote Bug as I think it was the nickname of the girl in question. Do you feel like that's a detriment to the song itself being a bit more in line with the common themes of the genre, or do you still think it works in the grand scheme?
I think it works in the grand scheme of the album narratively. If you remember that this is an album essentially listing the gripes and woes of a 21-year-old man who's still finding himself in the world. I do think that a couple of these songs do suffer from the fact that they came out in 2011. I think Bug and Could You, Would You, which I believe is the next song on the album, which is also about a woman that wronged him, do have a couple of iffy themes. I think they're a little bit too critical of the women in question for no reason other than they don't like the guy singing it. Whether that's Mike himself or a fictional version of himself, it doesn't really matter. I feel like there are some issues with those songs. It does help that like they're not for those reasons, although for those reasons they're my two least favorite songs on the album. I just think they're not as inspired as the rest. but it means I don't have an issue with skipping over them when I listen to this album. They do feel like a slight shift in the narrative of the album from beginning to end as a whole as well. I feel like they come right after Deadliest Catch, a strong middle point and a good conclusion to that first half of the album, which, as far as I'm concerned, is bangers all the way down. And then you've got these 2 tracks afterwards, which feel like a bit of a pivot away from the singer himself to here's gripes I have with other people, which I feel is maybe not the best direction for an album talking about how miserable and sad you are.
Yeah, and the tone, when you talk about a shifting tone, do you think that's a sort of recurring theme throughout the album? Do you think what would you say is like the mood or the general theme of the record, considering the mix of themes and, as you said, the sort of 4 quadrants of feeling happy, feeling sad, and the in-between? Do you think there's one that it sticks more to, or do you think there's a sort of flowing dynamic between all of it?
I think you've got to look at when this was written to devise that. This was written when long beanie hats were in fashion. The most attractive thing a man thought he could be in that era.
That's doing a lot of heavy lifting, the way you said that.
is a sensitive, sad boy who cares about feelings and is sad and wishes that he could be happy, and just he's so sad and broken and someone has to look after him and he's so sad, and did I mention that he's sad? And so I feel like, obviously I love this album, but I do feel like it has an issue with being a little bit of a pity party at times. That it's a sentiment that only comes across when you listen to the album as a whole. Individual songs have like the appropriate amount of sadness, you know, not so much that you're like worried about leaving him on a tube station platform on his own, but like enough that you go, man, he should probably like see someone about that. An album as a whole, I feel like it's up and down enough in terms of sort of musical tone to disguise the fact that most of the songs on it are like sad about girls, sad about not having any friends, sad about missing my friends, sad about another sad song, a song about being sad about not being a kid anymore, sad about girl, and like
that was in order as well.
It may well have been in order. That's how I was playing it in my head.
I was going through it in my list, and I was like, wow, he's going through asyndetically how to get like the themes of this entire record.
And yeah, there's nothing wrong with writing a sad song. They wouldn't have called it another sad song if there wasn't
another one to follow it.
Another one to follow it. But again, that sort of lends to the idea that they're sort of aware of the fact that this is like the sad sack hour. But as a piece as a whole, it feels less like someone trying to heal and more like someone trying to complain. I don't doubt that there is a lot of healing in this album, considering their next album was much less sad and a lot more I'm back on it, I'm like feeling better, I'm gonna jump straight into living, and if you don't like that, there's a door.
Well, the title, like changing tune in itself, has that implication.
It's
of
real been there, done that.
Yeah.
Like time to like stop being miserable. But yeah, everything about this album is very consistent in how it evokes that sort of like early 20s like depressive ennui. The album art, which is gorgeous, it's a hand drawn picture of a guy like holding his hands out. He's clearly been through his pockets, and there's just nothing there. And I feel like that is a sentiment that is carried through as well, that sort of sense of desperation and nothingness.
And one of the unique themes that comes out, which was in Between Bug and Could You Would You, which you've mentioned, was Up in Smoke, which is kind of an on-the-nose title anyway, but it's to do with the fact that Mike was smoking, as a kid, and had this horrible addictive personality, which, with my whole alcohol problem that I'm going through now, I kind of related to when I was listening to it.
Well, this is something I thought about as well. I've never had a problem with cigarettes. Me and cigarettes are actually very good friends. No, I'm joking. No, I've never had a...
He doesn't like you.
He doesn't like me at all. No, I've never had a smoking issue, but the sentiments of the song do feel like they translate to, other forms of addiction as well. He's writing about a time in his life where he's being forced to go through the motions of becoming a real adult, but he's still very young, he's still very impressionable, and he feels trapped in his ways still, which is definitely the energy that I got from that song.
I think that was the one, when I was listening through it again, the one that particularly resonated with me, because it's a song about being resilient and persevering, because he's constantly trying to quit, but keeps coming back, and it's a struggle that for a lot of people, I mean myself included, I think it was as of yesterday 2 months sober.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's and it honestly, it has changed my perspective and a lot of things that have been going on. I don't know, it's just enlightened me more, and I feel that, do you feel like when listening to that there is a sense of like that light at the end of the tunnel for him, or is it mostly about being stuck in that addictive pit, as it were?
Well, again, I feel like, and to reiterate, I love this album. I really like this song, but I feel like this is another one of those songs where it's not a case of, oh, I just have to get better. This is my way of healing. I'm going to get stronger through this. It's like, yeah, I'm probably going to get some horrible lung disease and like die because I just don't have the energy to get better. And so, yeah, I'm just going to just keep smoking, you know? I'm going to complain about it. I'm going to be really annoying about it, but I'm not going to do anything about it. And that is the energy I get from the song. Doesn't necessarily make it bad. I feel like he gets that sentiment across in a very, very succinct way. I just feel like at this point in the album, this is like track 8 or 9 on this album.
9, yes.
Track 9. And every single song so far, even the good ones, of which I believe at least like 7 or 8 of them have been like, oh, isn't everything rough and horrible? I'm so miserable. Anyway, time to sing another song about how everything's rough and I'm miserable, and not learn from it.
I mean, there's recurring theme, and then there's
recurring theme, and then there's I wrote one song 12 times, which this isn't. Okay, there like I
you keep prefacing this.
This is it. I feel like I'm being extremely rough on this extremely good album, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact that this was an extremely important album to me back in the day, and it still is. But I am now 26 or 27 years old, and I'm at the point now where I'm like, I'm still dealing with things every now and again. I don't think I'll ever reach the point where I'm not. I feel like having to get through all this anguish and stuff is just part of being alive. You know, you can't tell a story unless something goes wrong. I feel like having been 21 and having experienced a lot of what he like sings about in this album between the ages of, I'd say, like 17 and 23, and I'm not past it, but I've got this wizened, much more understanding, much more intelligent view of things as a correctly aged.
James, where have you gone? Who is this man?
No, I think it's a lot of it is.
Like your impression of a modern day conservative politician.
Oh, I don't even know what that was. It certainly wasn't that.
MP of Shropshire.
The MP of Shropshire. But yeah, I just feel like having sort of been through this album myself and come out the other side and been more or less fine. It wasn't a straight line, but having done it, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, mate, I think it hits a little differently now, and I can go into it with a bit more of a critical view and go, man, just like, get over it.
It was something similar you said to me about the film Scott Pilgrim versus the World, because that used to be it was in my top 4 on Letterboxd, and it's been one of my all-time favourite films for a while, and I rewatched it recently, and I remember you saying something about it, which is you started relating to a different part of the film. So initially when you're watching it, you go, oh yeah, video game references, oh fun, this, fun, that. And then you actually watch it for Scott Pilgrim as a character, and you suddenly relate to it in a whole different way, which didn't make it worse per se, you just saw it in a different light.
Yeah, it wasn't that I related to Scott Pilgrim. It's more, it became a different film once you are at the same age or exceed the age of Scott Pilgrim. I would also like to point out that the MP for Shropshire is actually a Liberal Democrat.
Okay. Thank you for proving that point to me 2 minutes after the joke was made.
So
I appreciate it.
But yeah, with Scott Pilgrim, and I feel like it's a similar case for this album. So when I first saw Scott Pilgrim, I was, I believe, maybe 15 years old. And in that film, he is, he plays the bass. He's got a cool girlfriend who's like 17, which is older than I was at that age. So it's like, I don't see the problem here. And he's like, has all these women fawning over him, and he's in all these karate fights, and he's such a cool dude, even though he's played by Michael Cera, who has never played a cool guy in his life. Like, I want to be Scott Pilgrim. And then I watched it again a couple of years ago when I was probably like 23, 24. And like from minute one, it's just like, God, this guy's a loser. This guy lives in a basement. He doesn't have a job. His girlfriend is in school, and he's like 22, which is like more problems than...
That's a whole other can of worms.
That's a whole other can of worms. And like everything about this guy is like, he is a loser. All his friends that dislike him do it rightfully so. The point where they like, he leaves the band and they stop talking to him. And it's like, yeah, obviously. And it's that pivot of perspective, I feel, that works for this album as well. I think going up to someone who's going through it when they're 21 and telling them to get over it is extremely terrible advice. But, you know, I did it. I simply got over it, and I'm completely fine and have no ongoing issues whatsoever now. So
I'm amazed you said that with a straight face.
Well, it's an audio medium, so they don't need to know.
Nobody has to know. I shouldn't have said that. But I don't know. I didn't know if that was relevant when mentioning it, but I think the way you've been talking about it, you have the initial perception of the album when you first listened to it, and then you've come back a number of years later and seen it in not a completely different light, but seen it in a whole new perspective, as
Absolutely.
it were.
Yeah, I think it's a very important album. If I were in ever the unfortunate predicament of having to speak to a teenager, I would definitely recommend they listen to this album under the condition that they also listen to it when they're in their like early to mid 20s as well. Because it's two extremely good albums from two very different perspectives.
The penultimate song, because we went on a lovely tangent there. Every single one of these, of the two I did together, I went on a tangent on a song I didn't even expect to. So I don't know if that was the same for you, going into detail for Up in Smoke, that was the song we started on, and you ended up on Scott Pilgrim comparison. But I've written this one down as the abbreviation WFTMBD SITTMBN, which stands for Working for the Man by Day, Sticking It to the Man by Night, which is about work.
Yeah, so obviously this album came out when the boys in the band was still having to work day jobs around being musicians, because, you know, getting big in the scene basically doesn't mean anything, even less now. But yeah, and it's about that, having to balance your day job with what you want to do as a passion. And when I was trying to fill my lifelong dream of becoming a music journalist, which then became wanting to be not a music journalist, I found this issue quite a lot in my previous job. That I worked for 2 years prior to the one that I'm currently in, that I was exceedingly terrible at. I really struggled with this. You know, I was at university for 4 years, and that fourth year was cut off by the novel coronavirus. Don't know if you've heard of it. And I went from not really having closure at university to having to do a full-time job, 9 to 5, in a cushy office. I'm doing this bit to sort of make it seem like I'm complaining about nothing, but I actually had a series of extremely hard jobs before that. I did some apple picking. I worked in a kitchen as well before I got the cushy office job. But the issue I had at the time was I was still determined at 23, 24 that I was going to be an artist of some kind. I was going to write the great American novel brackets British. I was going to finally learn to play that guitar that I bought to impress a girl when I was 15.
The notorious self-taught bass player.
Yes, that's the fella. And
that's not going away anytime soon.
And I was trying to keep writing. I was trying to establish myself whilst also having to do this 9 to 5 job that I absolutely hated. And again, I feel like this is a song that is, you know, it's very catchy, it's very well written, it's very well crafted, but it's a song that directly speaks to that naivety of being in your early 20s. You know, when I was 8, I wanted to be a novelist. When I was 10, I wanted to be a novelist. When I was 12, I wanted to be a hedge fund manager. When I was 15, I wanted to be a novelist. When I was 18, I wanted to be a novelist. When I was 21, I wanted to be a novelist. And then I realised there's not a lot of money in that. It's not really going to work out.
It only took you a mere 13 years.
Well, this is it. I feel like everyone's got those creative dreams. And to the people that follow them through, you know, I still feel like I'm going to get something out there one day. But the people that follow them through, you know, all to you. But there is this, like, painful naivete. When you're 21, you're 22, you got to go into the real world. You can't just, like, piss away your time writing stories. You got to go earn some money. And I feel like this song, when I was 21, going like, damn, that's me. I hate working. I'd much rather be sticking it to the man in the evenings. In this case, sitting in my room alone, writing stories about people on the moon. But, you know, I'm a little bit older. I'm a little bit wiser. Some might say the wisest I will ever be, unfortunately. And now looking back on it, you know, there's more important things right now than making sure that my chapters are the right length. So I feel like it does come back to that.
And Mike, in the other bit that I was looking at, he admitted that he tried to emanate the message of, and I quote, "Hey man, it's okay. We all go through some shitty experiences at work." And he tried to get that through the lyrics. And do you think that comes through with what he's writing?
Yeah, I think so.
In conjunction with the experiences you've had.
Yeah, I think that does come through pretty clearly in the song. I think it's just it's all right. It's a very middle of the road track. I've not got a lot to say about it beyond, you know, whining about how I have a full-time job in this
what you've already
economic
said.
crisis.
Yeah. Well, then we can move on to the final song outside of the three extras that you know nothing about.
Correct.
So we'll gloss over them fairly quickly. But ROI, which I presume is standing for Republic of Ireland. I
think that would be a smart presumption.
Because it's about where his family originated from in Ireland and how he's sort of unable to go there a lot due to, you know, when he was writing the album and getting, you know, into the industry, as you were saying. Does this one have... I mean, I don't think we've ever been to Ireland before.
No, I'm crucially not very Irish. A fact that was on Full Show, I went to a function with my girlfriend's Irish family a few weeks ago and thoroughly embarrassed myself as someone that cannot drink Guinness and cannot sing any of the words to a Wild Rover. It was a deeply embarrassing experience and one that I would happily redo again now that I've spent several weeks learning the words of Wild Rover over and over again to make sure I can be the guy that leads the chorus. But no, this is one of my favourite songs on the album.
I presume it's not to do with the actual Irish heritage of it, but to do with the familial sector.
Very much so, yeah. Like, yes, he sings about shamrocks and the flag being green, white and gold. It's the sentiment of the song is stronger than the actual substance of it. Walking along the streets that he used to know. Again, I've got a very distinct memory of being about, I think, 20 or 21, walking along, you know, the roads that led between the old house I used to live in and the pub. Under streetlights this time. It wasn't as late as the last one.
Not misty anymore.
I was taking the roads.
Advancements have been made.
I think I was probably in a pub that was better. It was probably smarter to take the pavement that time. There are many ditches in that field that I could have ended up in. But no, I've got very, very clear, very distinct memories of listening to this song on loop, just drunk enough to go, "It's about me," but not drunk enough to forget it all. Yeah, it's a very important track for me, despite having not been to Ireland nor being Irish in any way, shape or form. But yeah, exactly, you know, it's a song about Ireland, but it's also not when it's about me, the main character
of your story,
of everyone's story.
And when you get to the end, I think the other three songs I'll list off is "Live by the Remote, Die by the Remote," if you know anything about that one.
So I believe these last three songs I will have heard at some point. I don't really have an opinion on them. You know, they're just sort of, they've come up on playlists
some little
now and
extras.
again.
It's not about the extra US releases because the main 12 have been established.
As someone who despises the United States with all my heart and soul, this is a lie. I don't mean
We went this year.
We went this year, and I'm desperate to go back. I love it, at least aesthetically. No, yeah, I've not really listened to these songs, but I feel like as extra songs, however they tie into the narrative of the album is immaterial.
Well, I mean, respectively, we have "Live by the Remote, Die by the Remote," "Grounded," and "Beside Myself," in that order. So you get to the total of 15 tracks. I have listened to these, and like you, I can't remember a lot about them. But we can gloss over that because that's not the main part of the record.
I don't trust bonus tracks. If they were trustworthy, they'd be on the full album, but instead they hide in the bonus section like a coward.
Well, then with the full 12 tracks covered. Another point is the name of the album, World Record, which after 50 minutes of talking, we haven't actually gone into details of. Do you have a definitive reason as to why it's called that, or do you have your own personal thought on why World Record was the sort of encapsulation of the record?
So, off the top of my head, an opinion that I have not considered nor thought about longer than I have been speaking now, to me it comes off as a little facetious. It's a guy looking at himself with all the nothing he has in his hands, going like, haha, look, world record, I'm the guy, I'm the main guy, I've got the world record in being me. but it's said in a jokey, facetious manner because turns out that who he is not worth being. It's not a world record worth having.
So you're taking it as very... Is there any face value, or are you saying that it's a very self-aggrandizing comment?
I wouldn't even call it self-aggrand. I'd say it's ironically self-critical.
Okay. That's interesting. Because I've been thinking about this question as well, and I couldn't think of a single possible way of relating it to the other songs. I mean, that's a fair enough comment to make anyway. I couldn't add anything more to that. But
I think it would be curious to know truthfully what the intention was. The thing with this album is I've got my own opinions on it, with mainly that it's good, but from a thematic point of view, I don't actually know what the intention of the songwriter was in writing it, beyond like what is evident in the text. So yeah, I'd be curious to know, genuinely.
Well, we'll see.
Maybe I'll tweet him.
but it's like, oh yeah, I was on this podcast and I desperately need to know, why did you call it world records 12 years ago? I wonder if he'll be up for that. Does he seem like the kind of chap to do that? To answer. Well, haven't you already spoke? Well, you've met him.
I met him. I interviewed him a few years ago, and I did not ask him that because I had not really... The relationship I had with this album hadn't really developed to that point yet.
Well, speaking of in person, you went back... I can't remember what it was, but you talked about live shows.
Yes.
And we'd come back to it. What was it about the live show that you particularly wanted to mention?
This was one of their last live shows. If you look up... I haven't looked at this recently, so it may have changed or it may not be accurate. But the reason why they said that they broke up when they did was largely due to the fact that they felt that the flame was burning out a little bit. They were all stressed and tired, and they were no longer filling venues that they would have sold out in minutes, a few years before. And I was at one of those, what I believe to be one of the gigs they're talking about there. It was in my university students' union venue, capacity of 3,000. But they drew a curtain across half the venue because they didn't sell all the tickets. It was a much smaller venue. We did fill the space they gave us, but the fact that it was a little bit smaller, a little bit more intimate, means it was one of the best gigs I've been to. There was a point during the gig, he started singing another sad song, but he insisted on making sure everyone was sat down, came out into the crowd.
Was that on the floor?
We were all sat on the floor, and he came out, played it on an acoustic guitar, no amps, no speakers, no nothing. And it was mesmerising. It was brilliant.
I was going to say, that sounds like a very defining moment in... I've never seen a gig of do anything of that caliber.
It was incredible, and he sounds exactly as he does on the recording as well.
Does he really?
He's got a very, very strong vocal range. And but yeah, it was great. And then he immediately followed that up with Work For It, the best song off their 5th album, which is a real party song, circle pit the whole time. He had a loop playing about halfway through. He was pointing at people with pints, forcing them to down it while the rest of the crowd counted down. Oh, it was a great experience. It was the two extremes of that kind of gig, one song after the other. They were really, really fantastic showmen. And if they ever did a reunion of any kind, I'd be there in a heartbeat. I know that Mike Deuce is working on some new stuff at the moment. 2 of the other members of the band, whose names I'm sure will come to me in due time, have another band as well called Paper Mill.
I don't think
they've released anything in a while, but they've got some really good tracks as well.
I believe it was 2019 that they released an EP.
It sounds about right, yeah. But musically, very similar to Lower Than Atlantis, whereas Mike Deuce's solo act, Headache, was incredibly different. Still very good. I thought the 2 EPs that he put out under the Headache label were actually excellent.
It was 2020.
2020 was Paper
the West Way.
That's the one.
26th of June.
1
year out!
Very, very good set of songs there. If you're into what Lower Than Atlantis made, I definitely recommend checking those. And yeah, sort of Mike Deuce's Headache era, also very, very good.
And that's a whole other thing we could get into with his 2 EPs now, Food for Thought and then Get Off the Internet or something like that. Was it Get Off the Internet?
I cannot remember. I've not listened to those EPs in a healthy long while.
Food for Thought I know for a fact is correct.
But Food for Thought, I believe it is.
Food for Thought. And then I believe it's Get Off the Internet or something the Internet. But it was a very interesting, it sort of went for a different lo-fi-esque alternative vibe.
Yeah, whereas
was it Get Off the Internet?
It was Get Off the Internet.
Oh, I'm so good at my job.
And he's got some new stuff coming out. He's got a couple of demos under Mike Deuce on SoundCloud at the moment, which sound much closer to what Lower Than Atlantis was in sort of the middle of their career, I believe. He's not properly released them yet. He's been going through some stuff personally, which is not easy. But the music that he's putting out to get through that is truly exceptional.
And with a sort of final comment on that, as we get to, we've got his final moments of Lower Than Atlantis, getting into his new stuff and the new era. The only questions I had left are kind of the same thing, to do with personal anecdotes and experiences. But how would you say World Record as a closing factor, a closing statement? How has it influenced you? What is it that made you pick this over every other album that's out there? Because we've shared a lot of similar music. You were the one that got me into Mallory Knox and a lot of the pop punk that I listened to. I remember distinctly that you used to play Burnout 3 just to listen to the soundtrack.
This is true.
I used to question you on it, and then I realised how foolish I was to question you on such an idea.
If you can ever fit me into the waiting list for this podcast again, I would do a whole episode on the Burnout 3 playlist.
You did say this. It probably we'll try and see if we can get one.
It is excellent.
We could talk about that for hours.
Unfortunately, I probably could. But yeah, no, the reason I chose this album, in addition to the reasons that I listed at the top of the show, are I've always considered it to be an excellent album. I believe it's their best. It's one of my favourite albums of that era, full stop. But beyond what I think of it from a critical perspective, my opinion on its substance has changed more than any other. I still like Neck Deep's first 3 albums for the exact same reasons that I did when I first listened to them. Same can be said for the first half of Mallory Knox's career. Same can be said for Don Broco's career for the most part. That's a whole other episode I could do. But this one, I chose it because it was very important to me when I was a teenager. It was very important to me in my early 20s for 2 extremely different reasons. And I think that's worth noting. It's not an album that's aged poorly by any means. I still think there's a lot of things in here, barring some of the casual misogyny in its later tracks, that's still very important to that era of life where you're still trying to work out who you are, what you're doing, and where you're going to fit into the rest of the world. But yeah, I think it was crucial to me at that time in my life. But I also think what I took away from it is not to mope about stuff too much.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Exactly.
I've been going with that one for a while.
My life is not going to get any better if all I do is complain about the things that are wrong, and then that's the end of it. You've got to be a bit more proactive with it. At the same time, going up to someone who's having a rough time and shouting "Get better, get over it" is not sound advice, and I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. But I feel like a lot of this album that I don't necessarily agree with anymore leans into that other side a little bit too much of I'm sad and this is how it's always going to be and this is my personality now. And you're not going to get better doing that. Sorry, mate.
It's not the answer.
It's not the
continuously mope. Well, no, but I think that's a lovely sentiment to end on, because I think in all the discussions of the negativity and the sort of the sadness that comes with the album and the general themes and ideologies that are passed through, there is a generally hopeful and positive message that can come off it from what you've stated. Even amongst the general themes that are present, you've still found a way to get a positive message out of it.
There's a lot to say about this album. I know, because I pulled 90% of this episode out of my arse as I was saying it.
Welcome to podcasting, James. We've just hit over an hour.
I'm a man in my mid-20s who is not wholly insane, so of course
you'll love this album.
I'm on podcasts. Yeah, no, it's a great album. I'd recommend it to anyone that's even got a passing interest in alternative rock of any era, honestly. And I'd love to know how people of different backgrounds and different ages respond to it. If you're someone of a different background or age, send us a postcard. Let me know. I'd love to hear it. If you're someone of the same age and background, stop sending letters. I don't want to hear from you.
Even when you come to the conclusion, you still have to find a way to get a bit in. It's mad respect. Unless you are actually getting letters from random people.
Yeah, I keep getting these brown
who
envelopes
are
from someone called
26
sending
them to your house.
Someone called Mr. Shell keeps sending me brown envelopes. It's really annoying. Keeps asking for money.
Well,
Nightmare.
it's been a pleasure. Amongst your silliness and jokes, you've brought out a pretty interesting comment about this album. One that I was not expecting, genuinely, because we've shared a lot of interests music-wise. We've dabbled with the same kind of styles. But no, that's been very good. You've answered all my questions, which is a good sign.
Great stuff.
But thank you for coming on. I know you came down from London to do this.
Yeah, it was quite a trek all the way from London.
But how have you enjoyed the experience? Because I know you're looking to start your own podcast as well, if you're wanting to whack that in here.
Yeah, if you want to come listen to the podcast that I've not started yet.
I beat you to the punch on this one.
I'm sure I'll properly promote it next time I'm on the show. You can follow me on Letterboxd if you want to read my opinions about films, which will also be what the podcast is definitely about.
Do you have a name for it yet?
I
think you might have told me.
We did. We're workshopping it still. It will be about rom-coms in the modern era, how they've aged, have they aged badly? Most general answer being
Do
yes.
they know things? Let's find out.
Do they know things? Let's find out. But yeah, so that is the plan. Maybe next time I'm here, I'll have a bit more to plug.
Perfect. Well, it's been a pleasure. Well, as my first guest, you've gained a certain level of credibility in the PunkStance, PodStance era. But I hope you've... everyone else... I can get closer to the mic now.
First place on a list of one.
But
it's an honour.
Well, yes, a big thank you to James, my brother Buxton, for coming down and getting involved in this. And thank you guys for listening. I know I've done the first two by myself, and I was expecting guests earlier, but it turns out I'm really busy and have a life, as we've been talking about, and have stuff to do. But yeah, thank you again for listening. I'm hopefully getting another brand new person in, either my roommate or an actual artist might be coming in. I won't spoil yet, but you might know who it is, judging by the people I know. But yes, thank you one and all, and we shall see you next time on another episode of PodStance, the PunkStance Podcast.
Try saying that 3 times fast.
That is a running joke. It keeps happening.